win. You gotta want it to.
Take off.
Nice play.
One.
Pull away. Outplay.
Oh my God. Don't nobody want this.
1, 2, 3.
Dominate.
And welcome to the CEO briefing, Water the Blue Gold, Thursday, August 31st, 2023. Briefing number 226, Water is the people's asset. And we are at Water on Demand, of course, as our startup. Of course, the usual disclaimers. All right, so what's going on in real estate? Well, interesting things happening. You know what the Chinese curse is? May you live in interesting times. Well, these are interesting times for sure. So what do we have here? Well, this is interesting. We have an increase in new U.S. home sales from July 2022. And a year later, it's up a third, which is very good. Existing home sales down 17%. So that's an interesting stat. Total listings actually are rising throughout 2022 and into 2023. We've had a rise in home listings. It's not fully recovered, of course, but it's an encouraging trend. Now, on the other hand, against that, you have the issue of median sales price of houses versus real median household income. And houses are now more than 5 times real median home income. This is not great. It's been rising for the longest time, but it really started shooting up starting during COVID. Paul Fetcher goes, it's not how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you get up. I know. It's very well said, my friend. Indeed. It's all about getting back up again. Now, here's really, in a way, a pretty scary stat. When COVID came along and there was COVID and all the fiscal transfers that occurred, we had a huge amount of rise in savings, and that, I don't know if you see that shaded sort of light lavender area. Well, that is the accumulated excess savings, and they have basically run out. So as of August, well, just about now, June 23, we're down to 91 billion, just under 100 billion from a peak of 2.1 trillion. So we basically run out of these cumulative excess savings. Now, the good news is the savings are trending upward, but they're way below the pre-COVID trend. And I think that tells us all we need to know about the net long-term effect of the COVID lockdowns that were, in retrospect, very, very tough on the economy. All right. Now, here is an interesting little thing that I'm going to show you. We have a problem with Atrazine. There's a little clip about this.
They call it male feminization. Whenever you're adding all these chemicals, atrazine is the big one that's often studied. It's a herbicide. It's the second most used herbicide in North America. I don't know if you've heard of atrazine.
Right.
Yeah, it's in the drinking water. Totally illegal in Europe, by the way. They don't even allow it in Europe.
It's crazy.
And in America, it's the second most used after glyphosate. But they'll call it male feminization. You give these animals atrazine exposures, and they're equal exposures to a lot of Americans. And like, for example, if you have a frog and you've got him in 200 nanograms per deciliter of atrazine, 200, that male frog turns female. Now you've got a female frog. But it's not just atrazine, because now you got the plastic water bottles. Oh, and you've got all this fragrance with all these parabens. You're rubbing it on your skin. Your skin is absorbing all this stuff. Oh, and now you've got like sunscreen chemicals, right? We haven't even talked about that, but oxybenzone in sunscreen, by far the most widely used chemical in sunscreen. That's an estrogen endocrine disruptor. It acts like estrogen in your body. And they did a study, after I published my book, they did a study with oxybenzone, and one application of sunscreen, just one. 7 days later, it was above the government's safety limits in people's blood. And that's just an adult with one application of oxybenzone. And some people are putting it on their kids 5 days a week, and like putting it on their face with these like personal care products that brag about like keeping your face protected from the sun. They call it male feminization.
So that's a scary thought. Oxybenzone. Look for that in your ingredients for your sunscreen. Okay, there's more. Did you know that plant-based straws could be a problem? Oh, yes. Let's take a look at this one. Plant-based straws touted widely as eco-friendly have been found to contain forever chemicals. Woohoo! So they can be considered an additional source of PFAS exposure. That's that god-awful set of initials that I keep forgetting what it means. But basically, these are super hard to get out of the water. They can be gotten out. This is driving, for example, I told you about this a high-end hotel chain. We have a division, Progressive Water, that does these really prestigious installations, and we can never talk about them. For example, a certain very advanced car manufacturer, a certain very large marketplace, a certain very large power plant in the Southwest, and a very nice high-end hotel chain that's expanding fast. And they have specified every single hotel to have reverse osmosis of all the water coming in. That's it, right? At the minimum ultrafiltration, but really they want to have reverse osmosis because that's where it's at. I think that people should try and get better, more healthy products, but all too often they have their own industrial issues. So let's continue. Oh, there's bad news for fertility. Did you know that? Oh, yes, indeed. Let's take a look at this little report.
Epidemiologists have found humans across the globe are becoming increasingly less fertile as toxic chemicals continue to build up in our environment and accumulate in our bodies. Research shows the worldwide fertility rate dropped by nearly 60% between 1960 and 2018, and sperm counts have been dropping at nearly the same rate. If this trend continues, some epidemiologists predict that sperm counts could reach zero by the year 2045.
Researchers have found that male sperm count has plummeted by 50% since the 1970s.
A lap is the last place you want to use a laptop.
Correct. They do generate a lot of heat. And what this study found, Harry, is that men who use laptops on their laps, just like that, actually increase the temperature around their testicles very quickly within about 28 minutes, approximately 2 degrees Fahrenheit. And we know conclusively that an increase in the temperature around the testicles of about that degree is enough to damage sperm.
Oh, yes. So, well, of course, laptop on the lap, but here's the issue. It ties in with the earlier stuff about what's in the water, right? Atrazine. So what's in the water affects fertility to a major extent, far more than the laptop in the lap, if I may say. All right, so that's really what we're facing these days. Enough of the bad news. We have an amazing interview with Dan Early that was recorded. You're going to enjoy this. He's just an amazing guy. Let's go ahead and take a listen. Well, hi, Dan. How's it going?
Doing well, Riggs. Good to see you this afternoon.
First of all, I think you got some good stuff going on the prospective business, the projects that are going on. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, we do, Riggs. As you've heard recently in some of the weekly forecasts, our pipeline of opportunities through our partnerships with our outside independent reps and through our inside sales, our book of business, our prospective book of business continues to grow. And it is all that growth and the expansion of those future sales is all a function of the evangelizing we're doing, the promotion and marketing we do with related to the modular water systems and our product lines. Right now, I'm happy to report that our forward-looking forecast is very, very healthy, very, very strong. I think that strength is a function of a number of factors: our promotion and marketing focus, the product lines that we have, the value proposition related to the product lines, the ability to provide solutions and to bring much-needed services to consulting engineers and end users that need pump stations and wastewater treatment plants and treatment solutions and things like that. So very healthy pipeline looking forward.
That's really good news. What I love about your business is it is scalable. You've got a very tight crew right now because I know there's one key man who's on a personal leave. And so basically you're scrambling to recruit more people as fast as possible. Tell me a little bit about this evangelizing you've got going.
Well, we use a very focused, very deliberate approach to promotion and marketing. Since we are dealing with water and wastewater infrastructure systems and engineering related services, your target market really is two key individual sectors. And the first sector is going to be the consulting engineers and the specifying engineers that need our products as they work with and service their clientele. So that's one market. The other market is the end user markets, the people that actually need what we do. we are using a training and educational based promotion and marketing effort. And what that means is we are now routinely engaged in webinars and online training sessions. Usually they're about an hour in length. They are always live. I always lead those things. I personally lead them as the chief engineer for Modular Water Systems. And what we do is we will, depend on what webinar or what presentation we're giving, it is a deep dive into our technology, our solutions, the capability that we have, a lot of the functionality and the options that we have for our systems, whether it be a containerized wastewater treatment system or a packaged wastewater treatment plant or a modular equipment building or what have you. That process, when you use that process and you target and go after and promote to the consulting engineers who ultimately specify our products, they are basically your de facto sales force. So as we go and do this, and as we're going around in different regions and targeting and meeting with these firms and are making these presentations, we are building our rapport, establishing a relationship, and setting ourselves up for repeat business. The products sell, the stuff that we do, and the value proposition that is around modular water systems, it's a pretty easy sell. It really is. So really, this is an educational process to train up and to educate those specifying engineers and consulting engineers as to what our capabilities are.
Well, it's a wonderful product the more people know about it, the more likely they are to have it. I mean, that's really the hallmark of a great product, isn't it? Well, that's wonderful.
It really is.
And we recently commissioned a world-class competitive analysis for modular water systems. And out of about 80 slides, the first 40 were literally about the industry, the space, the evolution towards decentralization. It was very, very persuasive. I won't go through all those slides, but I was very interested by a couple of these slides because they gave us an idea of the size of market. Let me go ahead and jump onto the slide here. Here's one slide that's really interesting. So the total available market, if we look at our most focused size, food production, campgrounds and sites, miscellaneous manufacturing, embassies and government centers, we have roughly average wastewater solution $250,000 and a potential of 50% of the middle market. We've got 281 billion size, 3 million establishments. I hope that's enough for you.
Just barely.
Okay, good.
It's a huge market. The message is it is an absolutely enormous market. And key thing is this is a North American, a US-based market. So absolutely enormous potential there.
US only, correct. Now, adjusting for size, so then the service available market takes it down to the middle market, which we operate in, and that takes it down to 81 billion. But now we get the service obtainable market. It's a relatively nascent industry between 15 and 25% penetration. And so really our tight niche is $61 billion or 245,000 organizations. Again, it's pretty mind-boggling. It's a chunk of money. But this is good because it gives us a big playing field. Now, where are we in that playing field? That's a really good question. And this is the next slide right here. The large players, obviously, the very top end there, they're competing for the big pharma players and so forth. 1 to 10 million gallons per day, often even larger, like a PepsiCo. You know, it's almost like, yeah, it's decentralized, but it is like a mini utility all by themselves. At the bottom left, you have specialized and pump station players, and then sort of this mid-space here, but just focusing in on the mid-market players that do not compete above 100K gallons per day. Now, we're unique. How? Well, number one is we're very sophisticated. Number two, price is low. So we have a unique combination of low price and high sophistication. At that point, we look a lot at not just the durability of the system, which is fantastic, but the pricing is very competitive. So we have I think, a deadly combination. So those are the two slides I really wanted to get into. In this presentation, we have a really beautiful montage of testimonials here. Let's take a look.
gas stations, travel plazas, campgrounds, all of those types of facilities, once you get outside the metro areas, are on their own as far as their water and wastewater utilities are concerned.
Everywhere where there is detached installations, it makes sense for them to have built-in black water treatment and, of course, the ability to recycle.
They don't want to be in the utility business.
Yeah.
They want to run their campground. They want to run their business.
Traditional way, they're looking at 2 years for construction, maybe up to 3, and then you have like a 20-year lifespan usually. These treatment units here are warranted for 50 years.
I was introduced to Dan early. He just really had this cool concept of a turnkey package where they included all of the design and produced a modular plant that was shipped to the construction site, built to the spec. All the contractor had to do is dig a hole, pour some concrete, set it, and plug everything in.
It is a plastic tank that was dropped into a big hole cut into a 40-foot shipping container. It's very easy to send that down the road, low maintenance, once or twice a month. There's very much that can be done remotely.
Be able to take pre-engineered, prefabricated solution that can handle anywhere from 2,000 gallons per day up to 50,000 gallons per day.
Honestly, I was amazed. I was really looking for the easy button so that we can focus on doing what we do best.
The process is sophisticated, but it's very user-friendly.
Did not expect to get the level of a complete package being delivered in a prefabricated building with all wiring, parts, and components ready to go when it arrives on site. Everything worked seamlessly, right on schedule, if not a bit ahead of schedule. The price was excellent. The fact that this was a pre-engineered solution was fantastic.
Contractor could probably do this whole thing start to finish in about a week. They don't really see any value in looking anywhere else.
Clean water was being produced within hours. The engineer that was there, as well as the service provider, were absolutely amazed. They had never seen this before.
Each one of the situations, whether we were in Thailand or we were in Djibouti, Mauritania, the delivery and the design were both simple yet sophisticated. Be able to start that thing up in a matter of 6 hours. It was incredible and a real testament to the design and the engineering that Modular Water puts into their products.
The treated water that we produce from our systems is of the utmost quality. It has the appearance of almost being drinking water quality.
The word's getting around on how efficient and how the production of the water is so pristine.
I think as the news of this spreads and it becomes more widespread and public utilities, but also private landowners realize the affordability of this product, the great construction and reliability of it, and the ease of installation, I think it's going to become much more prevalent.
It's been a great ride so far and cannot wait to continue the relationship with Dan and Modular Water.
So it's just like a miracle.
Okay, so let's take a look here. Last week we had How to Ride a Roller Coaster Part 1. Here's Part 2. Let's take a look.
Is there anything that you kind of tell yourself maybe when an opportunity presents itself, so you know exactly who your early adopters are, who the target audience that you're going for is? But let's say that something, as you're going down that highway, there is an exit and all of a sudden somebody who you're not marketing to and is not one of your target customers says, we want it, and it just kind of becomes another opportunity. Do you say no to that? Do you entertain that? Or do you stay focused on what you know that your target audience is and you keep driving that direction?
Well, we get a lot of this over the transom, which is, hey, if you meet with so-and-so, he controls tribal lands in Oklahoma, and he can get you in with the tribal people. And then there's this grant program with the U.S. Department of Interior that there's millions available. And if you work on it for 5 years, you're going to get there. Like, no, thank you. But if there's a situation where, like this happened to us in the trailer park space, we were not in trailer parks, mobile home parks. But we know that this is a big problem because there's tens of thousands of them. And mostly the old school way of sanitizing your black water, as they call it, you know what black water is, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. It goes into a pond. Mm-hmm. And it's called passive treatment, meaning you do nothing. And that's that green pond on the side of the road. That's the pond that's got all the poop coming from the mobile home park. Well, state environmental protection agencies started to like, okay, wait a minute, you can't go on with this. This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's just terrible. So they started putting pressure on the mobile home parks. And it just so happened that we had an opportunity that somebody actually knew personally was stuck with a mobile home park and was being fined by the Alabama Department of Environmental Protection. And so we got into it. And it's a good thing they were a good friend of ours, because it was so hard learning how to make it work, because it's a very nasty, these ponds are mostly sediment and a little bit of water, and your pumps get clogged and this and that and the other thing. We got there, we solved it. They ended up happy. And then we started selling more of these because we were in the space. So yes, it's important to recognize opportunities. At the same time, you don't want to have too many of these at the same time, because that particular project lost us money. We made sure they got the result, but we spent more than they paid us. And, that's the cost of the learning experience. But don't have 12 of these going on at the same time. It's going to kill you. So fortunately, that was going on okay. And then we got into housing developments, and that has just blown up, especially in Texas. We're also dealing with a lot of the freeway rest stops, the trucker stops, because they tend to be isolated.
Right.
We're servicing them, RV campgrounds, interesting niches like that.
Okay.
And it's fine. It's totally fine to develop a business like that. And then we're also starting to do small cities. So a city of 50,000 or 100,000 people, our systems don't get very big, but they're big enough for that. And that has proven to be very successful. One of the things we pride ourselves on is that 60% of our projects are basis of design, meaning that the client selected our design and therefore cannot go to anybody else except us.
Interesting.
Like, we want that design. And boom, at that point, it's just a matter of us not committing an unforced error, because we have no competitor at that point. So
Gotcha.
I think that, we go through an entrepreneurship, we go through a phase of being generic. I'm selling plumbing services, or I'm selling on Amazon, or whatever it is. But over time, you want to get to where you are unique. That, I think, is what we're all aiming for, so that first of all, the margins are typically higher. I have a nephew who does very well on Amazon with psoriasis creams, and he's moved beyond having the private label lab do it for him. He's
Wow.
now doing it. So over time, you move into that phase of really controlling your supply chain and doing more of it yourself. A good friend of mine sold his Amazon business. There was that big roll up that occurred in the last 2-3 years. And by the way, the roll ups are having a hard time, because guess what? Those individual Amazon businesses were doing well because the entrepreneur paid so much attention, right?
So focused.
And you can't just, aggregate them all and make them work.
Yeah.
So they're learning the hard way. But anyway, he had a good exit, and now he's starting a fresh venture where he's going more supply chain. He's doing stuff much earlier in the supply chain, right? As opposed to just buying product from China. And part of that, of course, is this amazing deglobalization trend that's happening. It's a thing. Reshoring, as we call it, is that industry is moving back to North America. And there's a very good geopolitical strategist called Peter Zeihan. He was on, if anybody wants to listen to him, he was on Joe Rogan a couple months ago. But he says, look, here's what's going to happen. As industry moves back, it's going to create a huge boom in America from building all those manufacturing plants and having a supply chain that's not 5,000 miles away, it's 200 miles away, right, in Mexico or whatever. He says that after next 5 years is going to be tough, but then there's going to be 20 years of incredible prosperity for the North American region. Now, hard times for China, hard times for other places, no question. But deglobalization will favor North America. And that's something to think about when you go, well, what am I going to do? Well, there's going to be a need. Those factories are going to be built modern, automated, minimal labor. That's how they'll be competitive in this market, especially since Mexico already has a shortage of skilled labor today, right now, because it's already happening.
Right.
And so in our case, we're already planning to make sure that every one of those factories has integrated water treatment. because there won't be the facilities. It'll be in the middle of Mexico or South Texas or whatever, and there won't be the facilities. So self-reliant water treatment, integrated water treatment is the thing of the future. And there's all kinds of good reasons for it.
So what does the timeline on one of these pods look like? Like if you started one, I mean, what does that timeline look like from soup to nuts?
I mean, like one of the modular water system.
Right.
Well, today, this is one of the reasons why we are looking forward to a potential eventually getting onto a national exchange. Again, I can't talk much about that.
Sure.
But is to give us the capital to accumulate inventory, because we have a standardized product line. So there's, what do you want? 5,000 gallons per day, 10,000, 15,000, 20, 25,000. That's it. Boom. 5 choices. And it's either above the ground container on a pad, or it's on foundations in the ground. Those are your 2 choices. Thank you very much. And so we can build ahead. Today, however, it's going to take 90, 120 days to get it to you, because we build everything. We take care of the permitting. We build the whole system. It's complete. Shows up on a semi, dropped in. Here's what's cool. The site only has to have a regular facilities manager or janitor. It does not have to have a water expert, which is key, because when you're putting it in a housing development, you're not going to have a water expert. You're going to have you're going to have a really cool guy or gal that does the facilities management, and they just need to do the routine. It's faster than the industry standard, but it's not as fast as it's going to be.
Gotcha. And so I would imagine as you're building OriginClear, especially to the point it is now, but also especially looking to the future, you had to put together a team that understood what the goal is, understood what the vision is. I mean, you've done a fantastic job of explaining the problems, where you're going, all of that just right here. But what has that process been like as you've assembled that team and you've kind of thrown out that North Star of, this is where we're going to go. This is the rocket ship we're building. We're adding seats, but once it gets going, we need people that are focused on that direction. How was that process as you were building and as you continue to build?
It was ridiculously hard. I had a very hard time, and I can't tell you, how do you attract people who are at least as responsible as you? Today, I have, for example, Ken Berenger, who co-created Water on Demand with me. I have to tell him Saturday nights, turn off your freaking phone, dude. Stop taking my chats. No. These people will not stop. But before 2018, I had a problem. And then somehow I started attracting, well, actually starting in 2015 with our McKinney acquisition, but started attracting good people. And I think it's almost like success gets you more. It's very hard to get good people. We're going to have to ramp up fast. So what we're going to do is simply acquire companies like an engineering firm, boom, and it's already up and running. It's operational. The person who founded it figured out how to make it work, boom, up and running, right? So that's the other way to go. But hiring people is very hard to do. And these days also, post-COVID, there's a lot of turnover. I've noticed that, and I've talked to other people, they're like, I had the same staff for 3 years, and then all of a sudden, or 15 years, and all of a sudden, a good friend of mine, he has a CPA firm, a tax preparing firm, and he said for 15 years, all I had to do was just make it so first, and then all of a sudden he started to have all this turnover and training people and all this stuff.
It's a different world.
And, it is a different world. It's a contractor heavy world, which isn't bad by itself. There's also a lot of businesses have a problem with people working remote, which I don't. It's like, if you can handle it, go for it. We maintain a facility for people who want to show up. Some people need to. They want to get away from the family or whatever.
Always, and it always depends on the person. Depends on when they're the most creative, the most product management efficient. When do they get their best work done? Are they hitting the deadlines that they should? And that's just, again, like you said, I think COVID definitely ushered that world in. But now it's just kind of shown the spotlight a little bit more on both of those types of things, ensuring that the outcome is what we need it to be, but also providing that space, like you said, where you still have the brick store where you can go in and you can actually sit down in a conference room with people and jot ideas on a whiteboard, and you can have those creative outings. And it's not just, let's jump on a Zoom meeting, which a lot of times feels like very matter of fact, where let's jump into it, as opposed to, we're people who are working together. Let's build the rapport. It's harder to kind of build that rapport in a virtual world, as opposed to sitting down with somebody, having coffee with somebody, understanding how to work best with them, their needs and wants and your needs and wants and how those can work.
It's true. I've always found I love the Zoom factor, and I do a lot of critical meetings that way. But when I sit down with somebody for half an hour, things come up that I had not expected. We start going beyond. So I couldn't agree more. Right now we have staff in Virginia, in Texas, here in Pinellas County, Florida, Los Angeles. It's like meetings are good up to a point, but we're dealing with that, and it's unfortunately the way it is. But I don't think these are core problems. I think the core problem is for a business owner is how to essentially constantly reinvent the company. And things don't stay the same. They either go better or worse, right? Entropy in the physical universe means things get worse unless you do something about it. So these things decay. Things decay unless you really watch out. There's natural turnover of customers. Even the best operation has a certain amount of turnover, and poor operations have a very bad turnover. But so you got to think about, how can we continuously do more than the entropy? We got to overcome. Alice in Wonderland. You got to run just to stand still, or whatever she said.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I love that. And I love that you kind of give that nugget to entrepreneurship and to founders that are growing and everything else. You have to constantly be thinking in those terms, because it's not going to stay static, because the competition's not going to stay static. Your team's not going to stay static. The industry, everything is changing. So how can you make sure that you're evolving with that you're bringing the team along with you, that you're leading from that place, all of those things. Yeah, I think you're spot on.
Yeah, the other factor is basically, I think you need to be guilty of overreach. Like, for example, when we bought that Texas company in 2015, my backers said, "Well, so Riggs, you're going to shrink to just be that one company." And I went, "No, I'm not going to be a small $4 million a year company in McKinney, Texas, that will eventually grow to $6 million. I have ambitions to make real change happen."
Yeah.
And that caused me to get into real trouble and to stay in real trouble continuously ever since then. So it's been 8 years of continuous trouble.
I love that.
But things improving, and out of necessity, you solve the problems, or else you're toast. And I wouldn't take it any other way. I'm restless that way, I guess you could say.
Well, Riggs, I love all of those things that you said. I think that's so profound, especially for entrepreneurs, just in their mindset and the way that they approach the day-to-day, the issues that they solve, but also the main driver that their company is looking to solve. Well, thank you so much. This has been fantastic. And again, thank you so much for your time.
And straight into another member that I interviewed, this gentleman. For once, I actually had a guest on, and I was interviewing a podcaster, kind of reversing the whole game. And so let's take a look here. Here he is.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of the Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Riggs Eckelberry. And Riggs was brought up internationally. Dad worked for Procter & Gamble, so moved around a lot, and then got into the nonprofit space and wanted to help make changes in the world. At 22, became a ship captain in the South Pacific. And then in the 1980s, started to get into the computer and technology company. Or started a computer and technology company, and then got into the dot-com boom. And then in the 2000s, got into software marketing and also got into innovation. And then that's kind of what led to, or after a variety of different positions, worked his way up to CEO of the business that he's doing now that he'll be able to share a little bit more about. So with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Riggs.
That was an excellent introduction. Devin, you must do prep calls to get on this.
I always like to know a little bit about who we're talking with. So it was good to be able to condense a much longer version into the 30-second version of it. But with that, why don't we rewind and unpack it just a little bit and tell us a little bit about how your journey got started moving around internationally as your dad worked for Procter & Gamble.
Yeah, it was kind of a Mad Men kind of scenario where he was definitely John Hamm. And, welcome into the office. How about some whiskey, right? It's like that whole scene, which seems so distant now, 3 martini lunches and all that stuff. I don't know how people worked after that. I guess they didn't. He apprenticed early on. He's somewhere on the internet. I posted his memoirs of a soap salesman, where he, when they first got with Procter & Gamble, they apprenticed in the Bronx, doing shelf placement, putting up Tide on shelves. And then actually, from what I understand, it was a very happy time of his life. He and my mom lived on the Lower East Side and very carefree and penniless on Jane Street. But that turned into his first assignment, which is, hey, go run this new branch up in Toronto, Canada. He got a taste for it. And when he had an opportunity to go, on the sort of management track back in Cleveland, or Cincinnati, actually, he said, "No, yeah, I like these foreign branches." And so, perhaps at the cost of his career, he started running branch after branch. I was born in Toronto. We moved to Puerto Rico, then Venezuela, and Paris, Brussels, and that's where in Brussels he moved on to become an admin, McCann Erickson, and eventually started his own consultancy, helping American companies locate in the in Europe. But while he was doing that, the tide turned, and eventually he headed the New York office of equivalent of General Electric in France, doing a bunch of acquisitions in America. And then he had an amazing career. He ended up in Africa doing a lot of privatization. And so I think a lot of that rubbed up on me in that he was, by the standards of the time, I think very ADHD. My godfather, he had one line on his CV, which is partner, Devoice Plimpton. That's it. That was not my dad.
So your dad you kind of grow up with your dad doing running around the world, being the madman, and then you kind of grew up in the international arena. Then as you continue to grow up, I think you started to get into the nonprofit space and kind of wanting to look to change the world. Is that right?
Yeah, I fell in love with that idea coming out of boarding school in the United States, and it was the 60s, and anything was possible. And I still loved the whole idea. Did that for the better part of a decade, during which I also became a ship captain. And at one point, not involved with a nonprofit, I was a ship captain and first mate in the South Pacific on tramp steamers. I was a whole adventure all by its own. And at a very young age, as you said. So I arrived into the early 80s, and I really felt that technology was going to change everything. And without abandoning this sort of change the world mentality, I felt that technology moves really fast and the whole world was turning to that. And that's when I started, really thinking as a technologist. And with being a technologist, of course, it actually institutionalizes ADHD. You need to be that way. You need to be like, we have a business model. Let's destroy it. Let's cannibalize our own product line. Boom, right? Which normally you'd never do. But in tech, you have to, or else you die.
So no, I agree with you. And technology, as it continues to be introduced, evolves, changes, and you always have to keep on the forefront if you want to take advantage of it. So ship captain for a period of time, 22, going around the South Pacific, and then you shifted over in the 80s and started getting into computer and technology. Now, kind of walk us through, what did you do in that arena? Because I think you were there and you started a company, you got into the dot-com boom, got into communications, got into software marketing. So kind of walk us through a little bit of that part of the journey.
Well, the 80s was a lot of fun, but it was also a train wreck for me because I knew nothing. I was very gleeful. And this is one of the things, if you want to disrupt a market, learn a little bit about it. I think that makes sense, right? So I was like, hey, okay, boom. I love the promise of it. I read the tech magazines like they were literally truthful, which no, it was all BS. And so I started becoming an evangelist and converting, brick and mortar businesses from those safeguard, bear down hard kind of ledgers to wholesale distribution type products generally. That's what I mostly worked with. And it was fascinating. I'd go in there, I'd spec it out, get it going. The problem was, number one, I was undercapitalized, and it's very hard when you have no capital to have 12 people in New York City. That biweekly payroll is like, oh God, it just comes up on you again and again. And I'm very proud of the fact that I never did miss payroll ever in my career, but I did get in trouble because, I was in trouble, but I was working my way through it. But towards the latter part of the 80s, I lost heart. I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much work getting these companies going that it wasn't making really any money at it. And what I didn't realize was that creates potentially a 25-year relationship with that company where you're charging them every month. And I had no sense of that, recurring revenue model. I ended up giving the business to my best salesman, Juan, and he's a multimillionaire. He told me that, a few years back, he said, I still have clients that you and I opened up back in the day. And that kind of life cycle is something I hadn't thought of. It's like, you know what, just manage those sites and keep them going. And it's like being in the insurance business. 90% of the time, they don't even need you, but it still generates revenue. So one lesson was, first one was know your space. And I think I learned the hard way, that part. Second part was be aware of capital and what it's going to take, depending what you do. And the third one is don't give up. Pivot, persist, do what you got to do, whatever. Take a day job, do whatever it takes to keep on going, because the odds are you've got something good. Someone said any plan boldly carried through to completion is better than no plan at all. So just keep on trucking, right? And Patton said something like that as well. That was that big lesson. And after that, and I left New York City, and I really learned a lot about marketing because I became a wine importer, and then I became a direct marketer. I even worked for a time in film. And I just got to know a lot about commerce and marketing. And at the age of 40, I took a season off and went ski bumming, which people thought I was insane. But it was one of the best years of my life. I enjoyed it so much. Lost 30 pounds and just didn't sleep, just had so much fun. And that kind of set me up for the next stage, which, as you say, turned into the .com.
So now you do that, and it sounds like good eclectic assortment of different experiences and different avenues you went down. So now you get into the .com area, which is a whole different animal and had its rise and fall. But what did you kind of do during the .com era, and what did you focus on?
Right. So, I got drafted into a company in the utility software space called Quarterdeck that was making a big wager on internet. They did not succeed. They launched 28 internet products, and every one of them failed. But what I did for them is I learned product management, which is, I tell you, product management is a wonderful discipline. You learn how to plan and market and manage the product's development. You're the CEO of the product, but you have no powers, like total responsibility, no authority. And so you learn a lot about, marketing internally to, okay, I need more help. I need more QA people. Well, nobody's helping me. I'm going to go sell it to the QA people, that kind of thing. And so that was my first real experience working in the corporate world. We could do a whole podcast just on that. But what came out of that is I made a tremendous amount of connections, because when Quarterdeck blew up, of course, everybody was scattered to the four winds, and now I had a network. And they went to Microsoft, they went here, there, and everywhere. So following Quarterdeck, I started basically being a consultant, and then taking VP or C-level jobs and being a consultant, C-level jobs, and kind of doing that for about a decade. And that's when I arrived at my big opportunity in 2006, 2007, when I was finally I was COO and president of a software company that we got onto the NASDAQ. And just before it got on the NASDAQ, I went, you know what, this is not for me. I want to be a CEO. As my bad karma, I got to have the job. It was like, don't watch what you wish for. But so I called up some fund friends of mine, and I said, I want to be a CEO. And they said, yeah, but guess what? We're not doing tech anymore. We're doing green. That's the hot thing. And we want to launch an algae company. What do you want? We need three things. We need a bright idea. We need a patent, and we need a CEO. So we got you. We need the patent. It turned out I have a fabulous inventor brother who was super outside the box, and he had a patent that could be put to work for this. And of course, we had the bright idea of algae for biofuels. Good. We launched. It was so much fun. The model that we operated on was go public right away, do an S1 immediately, and raise money in the public arena. So day one in 2007, we were a public company, and it was so much fun running an algae company because it's kind of a who knew, and I got lots of attention. I was on Bloomberg, I was on CNN, on Fox Business. Stuart Varney called me algae. I'll call you Algae Man, and that was a lot of fun. But then it imploded because fracking brought the cost of crude down from $120, which was workable for algae, down to sub 50. And we looked at each other like, wait a minute, if we don't want to do algae supplements, we're out of the algae business. And so that's when we correctly pivoted from algae to water. Our algae extraction business turned into a water sewage extraction business. We renamed the company from Origin Oil, algae, the original oil, to OriginClear, clearing up the water. And that was the next phase. I would love to tell you that everything was perfect after that, but it was not. And of course, this is where this philosophy of mine of mistake-based marketing comes in, which is, I like to think of it, there you are in a box, and you're having a heart that you're sort of swimming with all the other fish, and you want to break out. So it was put very well in a Joe Rogan interview by Matt Taibbi, and he said Substack cracked the code, and Substack became dominant, moved way past Medium because they figured out how writers could make money. Well, so that's the next stage, is how do you crack the code, right? What is the element? And that consists of many attempts, like, ping, 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 and then you crack the code, and boom, you're outside of the box, and you're in your own space. And here's what's paradoxical at that point. At that point, stop the pinging, start executing. And it, as my rowing coach used to say, after that, it's small changes. Adjust, execute. Keep going fast, but now you're done with radical changes. You found it, stick with it. And that's the market domination phase. So kind of three things: stuck in the box, experiment to find crack the code, and then build to market domination.
So now you go through all that, and that kind of leads you to a bit, as you allude to, where you're at today, which is, be careful what you wish for, which is you took on the various positions and within your current company, worked your way up to CEO in 2017. Now, walk us through, as you became CEO, you said, be careful what you wish for, but how has it gone? And kind of as you've taken over that role in that position, what has that path been? Has it been, hey, everything I wished for, everything I wanted, money's raining down from the skies and life is perfect? Hey, I realize This is what I hate. I hate it, and we're always on the verge of bankruptcy, or somewhere in the middle. Walk us through that a little bit.
Well, the problem basically with the water industry is it's very resistant to change. And so, it's kind of like, it's a big monolithic, infrastructure type business, and they're like, everything's fine. You people just consume your water, flush the toilets, and you're good. But there's trouble in paradise. There's a big funding problem with infrastructure, and it's really falling apart. And big producers of effluent, people like breweries that produce a lot of sewage, are being told, well, you're going to have to truck half your sewage to another county because we can't take more. And so you have a capacity problem, you have a quality problem. And basically what's happening is that monolith is falling apart. Now, that's not what we got to. Originally, when we got in the water industry, we're just going to push this cool technology and we're going to license it. Okay, great. Unfortunately, the water industry, as I said, is slow to adopt. And so we found ourselves in this constant loop of trying to get the technology to go and making progress. But by the best estimates, it was going to take 12 to 15 years to find adoption. And I'm not going to do that. Mm-hmm. So that's when I started casting around for a better way to go. We started buying companies and creating companies, and that was good. But the important thing is I started looking at what's going on in the water business model. Again, crack the code. And what became real to me was that because of the breakdown of central infrastructure, which is not being fixed with money, it's not being fixed at all. They're trying to raise water rates. Do you know that water and sewage rates inflate at the same inflation rate as college tuition? It's ridiculous. So, and even that doesn't fix it. So there's just not enough money. It falls short perennially. So what's the solution? Take the users off the grid, unburden the grid. And that became decentralized water and helping companies become self-reliant. And that's become a thing. Like this year, PepsiCo said, we're going to recycle 80% of our water. Well, in order to do that, they have to treat their own water. That's no longer sending it to the city. That's over. Same thing with pharma, chip manufacturing, food and beverage, energy. They all need to treat their own water because they're just too heavy a user. And it's now also true, more and more true of these middle class of users like breweries where they have a lot of output. So decentralization became our thing. And we moved into it with a technology goal and doing well, but again, just growing incrementally. And that's when we arrived at the COVID era where we realized we really had to change things. We had to, this is in February of 2020, and we just really didn't know what was going to happen. We knew there was a real problem. Wuhan having shut down for a month, price of crude took a deep dive, I think the second week of February. And you're like, okay, this is a real problem. And we didn't even know there was going to be lockdowns and stuff, but we also didn't know there was going to be a CARES Act, that a lot of money was going to be thrown at it. So we're like, okay, there's going to be a capital problem. And, customers are not going to be able to afford these systems. And that's when we came up with the idea of getting investors to invest in water systems that would then be put out on a water as a service basis. The company that wants the water treatment doesn't pay, they pay engineering fees, but they don't pay capital. And they sign a service contract and they pay by the gallon like they're used to. Everybody's happy. And that's the model we're working with right now. It's become really attractive to investors. They like the idea of investing in water like an oil well. So we still have the technology thing going on, which is super cool. And it, post-COVID, really took off. So in 2022, we doubled our business and looks like we're doubling again this year. So double and double and double. That's super cool for the water industry. But in addition, we have this cool new capital program, which will be like GM Financial and GM. That is starting to be where we feel we've cracked the code. And now we just get into the market domination phase.
No, it sounds like, when you're trying to change an industry, it's certainly not as easy. It takes, some pivots, iterations, figuring out what the market will bear and how you do that. And sounds like you're certainly headed in that positive direction and making some great progress. So that's certainly some exciting times. So, well, with that, now as we've reached the present day of your journey and we're already reaching towards the end of the podcast, I always like to wrap up with a couple of questions. So we're going to jump to those now. So the first question I always like to ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made? And what'd you learn from it?
I would say the worst decision I ever made was to leap into this computing space in New York City without adequate preparation. Literally the first computer I sold, when I demoed it, I didn't know where to find the on-off switch. I think that's criminal. I mean, looking back, and I was like, really, dude? So it pays to get market apprenticeship, familiarization, learn your business, learn from masters. And I figured this out that, you sort of get into this lone hero mode but you don't want to be Superman. You want to be League of Avengers, right? And that's the second part, is that I really learned that like in New York City, it was me and a bunch of people. Well, no, it needs to be a tight group of fellow managers with you. And that's what I'm very grateful to have in the current company. I have people who have their own motive power, and I have to tell them on Saturday night, please turn off your freaking phone and take care of your family, because they're that motivated. So that's the other thing, is don't be a lone wolf. Don't be, again, number one is I can figure this out. The saying, glowing it right. I'm going to glow it right. I'm going to do everything okay. And then part of that also is I can handle it all by myself. That does not scale. It also results in serious problems. And of course, you can't be that. I don't think anybody would. Why would you want to be Superman? What a terrible job.
No, absolutely. So no, I think that sounds like some great mistakes to make, or at least great mistakes to learn from. And sounds like it worked out well, and had some great learnings along the way. So with that, now we're going to jump to the second question I'd like to ask, which is, so now if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
So the first thing is apprenticeship, familiarization, get to know it. Really, really pays off. Let's just take a simple example of starting an Amazon business. The last thing you want to do is just start, jump into it and start ordering from China, and now you find yourself in trouble. I've heard those stories so many times. Either one of two things: either learn from somebody, or start on a very low pilot level. Like, I'm going to order some Frisbees and just going to try that out and learn on a small scale. That's number one. And then number two, as I mentioned before, have some idea of how you're going to fund that thing. Now, there's two kinds of startups. One is N+1, that is an existing category, and you're adding to it. You're doing something innovative on top of the existing category. And the other one, this is all from Peter Thiel, is 0+1. There's nothing there, and you're creating it for the first time. N+1, you should be able to, capital should not be an issue. You should just be able to get it going, because it's already been mapped. It says, like I say, Amazon business been mapped out. Now it's just a matter of, figuring out your model and making it work. But 0+1, now you've decided to disrupt. You be aware of what it's going to take. Knowledge is a correct estimation of effort. Know what it's going to take to make it. It's the 0+1 model is very, very rewarding, but it's super hard because you're creating something where there's nothing at all. And of course, that's what I love. But it has been a lot of stub toes along the way.
It's a balance, with the going it alone, building the team, getting the people around you, and also breaking into a new market. And sometimes it makes sense to go one path or another. But I definitely think that the advice you gave is some great ones for their people to take into account on their journey. So, well, thank you again, Riggs, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Devin, thank you for that very cool thought. And I look forward to maybe touching base again in 6 months or a year, and we can update.
Awesome.
Right on. And which brings us to the freewheeling discussion. And this is where I bring in my main man, Ken. Let's see.
So he's a good interviewer, right? You can tell he's an entrepreneur. He definitely knows what he's doing. There was a lot of stuff you covered. So to even expand on it, the only thing that struck me, and it was like so early in the process, I should have wrote it down. But I love the kind of get stuck in a box, crack the code. And this was towards the end. That's why I remember.
Right. So, in fact, it's almost a diagram in my mind, right? You're in what I call the clutter ghetto. So you're in a box where you're not differentiated, and then you try these efforts to get out of it, right? Eventually, you find an angle, and then once you've got it, and this is what we did with Water on Demand, you build, and then you start getting into the small changes, right? Just adjust. So at some point, you stop doing mad, frantic changes. You kind of like, okay, we got this.
Right.
You've noticed that our model has not shifted for the last 12 months, really.
When I say shifted, you're talking like less than 1/10 of 1 degree.
Mm-hmm.
They are nominal. And then the last part is simply execute till market domination. So what you described is the last 2 years of our life. Basically pinging around the box, right? And then, kind of cracking the code. And then, making major changes, and then these tiny course corrections. And now it's just basically execution to market domination. Another one of the other cool things that you mentioned is during the early part of your discussion in how we're going to be reshoring all of these manufacturing localities, and the co-location of water. Yeah, that's going to be automated, so there won't be a lot of. In other words, for us to be able to compete with China, well, first of all, China, we can actually outcompete them now because we can automate the low skill labor, the kind of the very high intense cost of labor. We can automate that away.
You don't have to have those legions of people like at Foxconn who are like going tick, 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 tick.
Right.
Forget it. It's over.
Right. And they also say that China is going to have a major population problem, so they won't have the fodder. They treat people as fodder. Okay, so we're going to automate, and automation brings the cost way down. But here's the thing: they talk about AI is going to destroy AI. You can get a welder, and AI can actually, you can get an automation to weld something, right? So yeah, that will eliminate. But the people who have actual expertise that need to inspect those welds, in other words, knowledge-based stuff, that will never go away. So there's going to be AI and technology and automation proof fields, and guess what they are? They're all in the trades.
In the trades, yeah.
Right? There is going to be an absolute renaissance of tradesmen in the United States over the next 20 years. I'm telling you, welders will make more money than lawyers. In special, under certain circumstances, welders.
They'll be the upper crust of lawyers who make good money, right?
Right, the top tier.
Right.
The average lawyer makes $80,000 a year, though.
Exactly.
The average lawyer makes $80,000 a year. The average welder makes like 85. Right? So it's already true. But what I'm saying is that tradespeople are immune from this AI, Borg assimilation thing, right? And as we reshore these businesses, and we're going to have to add tons of skilled positions. I'm talking in the millions, and these are super high-paying jobs. So what if the people that were working in the factories have the capacity to become technically proficient at a certain skill, their quality of life can improve dramatically. They won't be $18 an hour factory workers anymore. They could be real wage earners. And look, most of this stuff is just experience in it and limited, trades education. It doesn't require 6 years of schooling. You could become a certified welder in what, a couple of months?
Well, and it's apprenticeship based mostly. I mean, look, also we have a big problem here in Florida with the quality of the workers, and we're so grateful that there's an influx of very strong Mexicans who have a really wonderful work ethic. So I wanted to mention Paul Fetcher. He says, good lessons learned. Paul was there in New York. He watched me go through the pain. Oh, Lord. He is a witness to what went down. I'm going to put this, while we're still talking, I'm going to put this on screen. Let's see, because there we go. We have Ken Barrett. See how
kind of cool, the slide thing now, right? Very slick.
The transition.
Very slick.
So we have exciting things happening that we can hardly talk about. Full picture with Ken, schedule with him, and we will fully brief you. Don't forget to fill out your Zoom survey. It gives us vital info. And
yeah, I know, right? We're going to have two hour briefings now just so we can play.
Exactly.
All right.
Anyway, listen, things are going really well. Dan Early, you can tell his business is booming. He's today I approved. He talked about that engineering manager on the 28th. Well, we approved his job offer today. We can keep pushing people in there because they have more business than they can possibly handle. And AJ says we're taking it to the next level, and we are. And AJ, you're being interviewed next week because AJ, the marketing czar. Unfortunately, it will not be this crazy OBS because I am going this weekend to Mexico for my son's wedding. He had a COVID wedding in November 21, which means we weren't there.
It was a wedding. Right?
Yeah. LA, lockdown, whatever. So this is in Mexico. We'll be having the big wedding on the weekend, and I will still be in Puerto Vallarta for the next briefing. So we'll do it old school. It's been wonderful having you, and I feel so relieved that somehow this OBS experiment has worked. So we're starting to get it going on. And thank you to AJ for having made it happen. He's a wonderful guy. You're going to love the interview next week, so be sure to make it. Thank you, everyone, and peace out.
Good night.